Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and welcome to my top 10 episodes of Adventure Time Season 4. With the first 3 seasons, I'd have a pretty easy time picking my top 8 or 9 entries, but struggled picking the last entry or 2. Well, with Season 4, I actually didn't have much of a problem at all picking 10 episodes. The problem was actually ranking them. Seriously, aside from the top 3, basically all of these episodes are pretty interchangeable, and I think that speaks a lot to the quality of Season 4 as a whole. The worst episodes are easily some of the worst from the first 4 seasons, but the best episodes are just as good, possibly even better, than the best episodes from Season 3. But hey, no more stalling. Here are my top 10 Adventure Time Season 4 episodes. At number 10, we have Lady and Peebles. Man, Lady and Peebles is such a unique episode. It's the first episode to feature Princess Bubblegum as the protagonist, and one of only a handful of episodes to feature Lady Rainicorn in a starring role. Peebles' focus on science makes watching her as the protagonist so different from watching Finn and Jake. As with most dungeon episodes, the dungeon itself is really well designed here. It's cool how the whole thing is themed after anatomy. Though this eyeball room totally freaks me out every time. Ricardio makes for a great villain here. He's well foreshadowed with the heart monitor, and George Takei does just as great a job voicing him as he did in his debut episode. There's just something so uncanny about the way his body looks, it's really fitting for his character. Seeing PB beat the ever-loving crap out of him is such a cool moment for her. A very well-staged fight scene as a whole. Season 4 in general has a lot of great moments for Bonnie, but Lady and Peebles especially really shows what makes her stand out as a character. At number 9, we have Return to the Nightosphere. If you want a Season 4 episode that's just pure wacky fun, then Return to the Nightosphere is probably the episode for you. I think this Hangover-esque story structure really works well for a Finn and Jake adventure. It adds a lot of mystery to the story. At least I think this is like The Hangover, I've never actually seen it. The Nightosphere itself is such a fun location to explore. I love this crazy wide pan over everything. There are so many little details packed in here. The humor here is very strong as well. The running gag where everyone is disgusted by Jake holding a banana is pretty funny. I love that noise Finn makes when he's given up. And in general, there's a ton of great bureaucracy jokes. But the whole waiting in line sequence absolutely kills me every time. The way we see Finn and Jake progressively begin to lose their sanity, only to just cut to them being perfectly fine, it just sends me such a hilarious sequence. The whole fight scene between Finn, Jake, and corrupted Marcy is pretty fun as well. The ending does a good job building intrigue for the following episode. A really fun start to a pretty solid 2-parter. At number 8, we have Sons of Mars. Sons of Mars is interesting because it's our first real Magic Man focused episode. Sure, there was Freak City back in Season 1, but that episode only included Magic Man very briefly. This episode, on the other hand, gives us a much greater glimpse into who Magic Man is as a person. We see his house, we hear about his crimes, we get to see a picture of Margles for the first time, or even more subtle details like the fact that his Martian transporter only requires you to think of other people for it to work. But since Magic Man hadn't thought about anyone in the past 200 years, he just presumes that it's broken. That, combined with this little glance he gives the photo after Finn tosses it away, really paints Magic Man to be a much more tragic character than he would appear on the surface. Just as a side note, I love this little memory song, I quote it all the time. It's also great foreshadowing for next season's All the Little People. All the stuff on Mars works really well for me too. It gives us some pretty interesting lore and visuals, and seeing the King of Mars sacrifice his immortality for Jake is a genuinely touching moment. But of course, the real MVP of the episode is Tiny Manicore. His new prison is Shame. At number 7, we have Princess Monster Wife. This episode is such an interesting take on the generic Ice King captures a princess storyline. Him stealing a bunch of princess body parts to form his own princess is a really funny concept, but in execution it makes for such an interesting little what-if story where we see how the Ice King would act if he actually had a wife. I think it's fascinating how the Ice King treats this person with genuine love and respect. It's not a super exciting or action-heavy episode, but there's a lot of nice little moments in it. There's just something very pleasant about seeing the Ice King do everything he can to make his wife happy. And I appreciate that the princess's emotions are portrayed very realistically. It makes sense that someone made up of other people's parts would go through an identity crisis. The song in this episode is pretty solid too. For some reason, Ice King pulling out a recording of himself singing in a much higher pitch always gets a solid laugh out of me. It's not a super laugh-heavy episode as a whole, but the story knows when to lighten the mood a bit. Ultimately, Princess Monster Wife isn't gonna be an episode for everyone. I can totally see people being turned off by how weird the concept is, or the fact that the story here is relatively mundane. But if you're looking for a pleasant, chill episode with some interesting themes, then I'd recommend it. At number 6, we have The Lich. Well, transitioning from one of the most mundane episodes of the season to easily one of the most intense, The Lich is an awesome season finale. There's a real sense of innocence to Finn's portrayal here, that in his mind, him and his hero Billy are just gonna collect all the gems, defeat the Lich, and everything will be fine. It makes the Lich's reveal in this episode all the more heartbreaking. This is also the episode that introduces us to the series' multiverse, which I guess makes it somewhat responsible for that Fiona and Cake spinoff we're getting next year. I really like the way it's projected to us through the Enchiridion, it's pretty cool. Though for some reason this joke would always break my brain as a kid. But of course, the climax to this episode is just fantastic. Love the animation on Finn destroying the book. And great character acting from Jeremy Shada as a whole. But man, that cliffhanger destroyed me when I saw this episode for the first time. The wait for the Season 5 premiere was just painful. The Lich is easily one of the most dramatic and intense episodes from the first 4 seasons, and in many ways it really paved the way for the series' future. At number 5, we have Goliath. I find Goliath to be a very thought-provoking episode. Thought-provoking in the way it discusses the theme of nature versus nurture. How such a seemingly innocent character like Goliath can quickly be corrupted by the wrong teachings. You do sort of feel bad for Goliath in a way. She totally had a lot of potential, but once she realized what she could actually do, it corrupted her. Goliath's design is very cute, but also slightly off-putting, which really fits her character. Though that eyeball is definitely freaky, I'm totally with Jake on that one. They do a lot of fun stuff with Goliath's mind-reading abilities too. This whole sequence of Finn trying not to think of the plan is just so great. Just perfect use of comedic escalation. There's something very poetically sad about the ending to this one too. These two beings who are so evenly matched that they're forced into a stalemate for the rest of eternity. A tragic ending for a very tragic character. At number 4, we have Princess Cookie. I don't know about you guys, but in my opinion, Princess Cookie is an episode that's held up really well over time. Obviously, I don't know whether or not this was written to be a trans allegory, but as a trans allegory, I think it works really well. It really captures how often adults will belittle or deny trans kids of their gender identities, and the ways in which that can traumatize them as they grow up. But it also demonstrates the way in which being there for your trans friends can help them through dark times. I'm really glad that Baby Snap's story here is ultimately a happy one. Of course, I'm not trans myself, so I'm not gonna act like it's a perfect one-to-one allegory or anything, but I think it works well enough for me to commend it. The episode does a good job making you sympathize with Baby Snap's struggle here. I really like the way their story here is connected to Jake wanting to be a mailman. It naturally takes what could have just been a throwaway joke and makes it an important story element. And it helps us understand why the two would end up growing a bond together. And man, that attempted suicide scene is so well done. Absolutely beautiful music and cinematography. It's a beautiful episode as a whole, and Baby Snaps is truly a trans icon. At number 3, we have King Worm. Man, King Worm is such a trip. It's honestly insane just how much weird imagery they stuffed into this 11 minutes of television. You gotta commend the crew for taking full advantage of this dream setting. But at the same time, I appreciate how the episode uses this setting to tell an actual well-told story. The twist that Jake was a part of the dream, for example, is one that makes a lot of sense. Because the explanation that Jake knew so much about the dream world because he sleeps a lot doesn't really make sense the more you think about it. And man, this is another one with just an awesome climax. They really just go all out with the visuals here, and the way it lays out all of Finn's fears is just brutal. Seriously, Finn deserves therapy after this episode. I admit, it's a little tough describing just how good King Worm is, as its main appeal is mostly in its visuals. But basically, if you're looking for a really off-the-wall, trippy episode of Adventure Time, King Worm is definitely the one for you. There's definitely a reason why they kept doing Dream episodes after this one. At number 2, we have Card Wars. Man, Card Wars is such a fun episode. As far as goofy episodes of Adventure Time go, this is definitely up there with Hitman as one of my favorites. Just a perfect episode all around. The idea of Finn and Jake playing a card game for the whole episode is a stupidly simple concept that's executed with so much grace. This could have easily been another really frustratingly boring episode like Web Weirdos. But instead, through the use of these holographic characters, it becomes one of the most visually interesting episodes of the series. These characters seriously just add so much to the immersiveness of this card game. What a creative concept. But speaking of the visuals, we gotta talk about Finn and Jake's faces in this episode. I love just how over-exaggerated these facial expressions are. They crack me up. Some of these just live rent-free in my head, man. There are so many quotable lines here, too. I flooped the pig. I do not play such games with Jake. Bimo Chop, if this were a real attack, you would be dead. Card Wars Super Amadeus. The fact that the stakes of the game are the loser being a dweeb and the winner being a cool guy is so funny to me that the phrase cool guy is literally in my Twitter @. Card Wars is such a good episode, it could easily make my top 2 in just about any other season. Heck, it could even make number 1 in a few of them. But unfortunately for it, it's in season 4. And although I debated the order of this list multiple times, there was no debate on what my number 1 would be. And my favorite Adventure Time season 4 episode. Do I need to say it? I think what makes I Remember You so special is the way it's able to tell us so much about Ice King and Marceline's relationship without really saying that much at all. We get little details like this uncomfortable glare Marceline gives, or the fact that her initial reaction to seeing the Ice King is a simple no. Again, not much is flat out said about their relationship, but little details like these really get us into Marceline's head. Obviously, we'd learn more about Marcy and Simon's relationship as the show goes on, but I appreciate that this episode doesn't hold the audience's hands. It lets the audience be a little confused because it makes the character drama feel a lot more real. Relationships with people going through mental illnesses are always complicated. It's a very simple episode at its heart, mostly only taking place at Marceline's house. But because of that, it's able to put its characters and their emotions at the forefront. The episode also makes great use out of dynamic camera angles. Oh, and I haven't even talked about the songs yet. They're all brilliant, and I love the way they're structured too. How we start with an Ice King only song, then we get a Marceline only song, and finally end with the two of them singing together. It's very representative of the way these two grow to understand each other throughout the course of the episode. And man, that final sequence, it's just beautiful. Seeing these two very different people grow to understand and accept each other for who they are, it just hits me in the feels every time I watch it, and I've seen this episode hundreds of times. It really is a magnificent scene. I Remember You is not only my favorite Adventure Time episode, but possibly my favorite piece of media ever made. It's legitimately unreal just how good this episode is. At the very least, I doubt anyone's gonna disagree with me saying that it's the best episode of Season 4. It is a perfect episode of television. And those were my top 10 Adventure Time Season 4 episodes. But even though I didn't have much of a problem debating what would be on the list, I still have a couple of honorable mentions I want to shout out anyways. Daddy's Little Monster is a pretty strong follow-up to Return to the Nightosphere. There's some solid character drama here between Marcy and Tunson. And Beyond This Earthly Realm has some really cool visuals combined with a fun dynamic between Finn and Ice King. Please let me know what your favorite Season 4 episodes are in the comments. Kirby, out.